Picture this. Every single night, millions of people zip themselves up in these thin, flimsy little nylon tents and just go to sleep. We're talking national parks, dense forests, deep wilderness areas. They're literally sleeping right in the middle of grizzly bear territory, wolf country, and mountain lion ranges. And yet, almost none of them ever get eaten. Now, on the surface, you might think, well, yeah, of course. But when you stop and really think about the sheer biology happening out there in the dark, it becomes this massive, fascinating puzzle. And that is exactly the core mystery we're unpacking in this explainer.
Because let's be brutally honest for a second about what you actually are when you're zipped up in that sleeping bag. You are basically a 180-pound bag of meat. You are completely unconscious, you're lying flat on the ground, probably making some weird snoring noises, and you are utterly, entirely unable to run away. By literally every strict biological definition out there, you are the absolute perfect prey animal. I mean, you're a free meal served on a silver platter. So why doesn't anything eat you?
Okay, let's dive into this, because looking at the source material, the very first thing we have to realize is that you aren't actually hiding. You know, most large predators, wolves, mountain lions, leopards, hyenas, they are the most active between dusk and dawn. That's their time. That is when they are hunting, and that's when they're hungry. And they absolutely know you are there. A grizzly bear, it can smell you from 20 meters away. Under the right conditions, a wolf can hear your heartbeat from over a mile away. Right now, a mountain lion could be sitting 30 feet from your tent and you'd have zero idea. The point here is, they aren't missing you in the dark. They are actively making the choice to ignore you.
Which brings us to Section 1, Predator Psychology, Survival over Bravery. To really understand why they pass up such an insanely easy meal, we've got to get inside the predator's head. You see, predators aren't built to be brave. They are built to survive. And out in the wild, bravery and survival are two very, very different things. A wolf that takes an unnecessary risk simply doesn't live long enough to pass on his genes. A lion that charges blindly into a completely unknown situation, it doesn't eat tomorrow. Every large predator alive today descends from ancestors that were exceptionally cautious, and this brilliantly illustrates why we are so deeply problematic for them. Look at this comparison. Over millions of years, predators have evolved to read really predictable responses from normal prey. A deer senses danger, it freezes. A rabbit gets spooked, it bolts. But us, humans, we feel entirely wrong to them. We don't move like prey, we don't sound like prey. We just lie completely still for hours on end, breathing at the slow, steady rhythm, radiating heat, making absolutely no attempt to flee. We just do not behave like anything they've been programmed to hunt.
And on top of that bizarre behavior, we emit incredibly strange signals. Just think for a second about the sheer amount of weird stuff we drag into the woods. We're covered in synthetic fabrics that have literally never existed in nature. Our sweat is packed with all these unusual chemicals from the processed food we eat and the deodorant we slap on. We bring metal gear, we build fires. So to a wolf or a bear, nothing about a sleeping human computes. You don't register as food, you register as a bizarre, super confusing anomaly. And that brings us to a really critical concept in animal behavior called neophobia. Basically, it's the instinctive fear of the unfamiliar. Most large predators have a massive, heavy dose of neophobia, and honestly, for good reason. In the wild, the things you don't recognize are the exact things that are most likely to kill you. So a new smell, a strange sound, or some weird shape in the darkness that doesn't match anything stored in that animal's memory, it is never treated as a fun curiosity. It is treated as a lethal threat. For them, the smartest move is always, always to avoid it.
Moving on to Section 2, a deeply confusing target.
Now, when we look at highly social predators like wolves, they don't just see us as a physical object. They actually try to read us as a social entity. Researchers have observed this very specific, fascinating pattern when wolves encounter sleeping humans. They'll frequently circle the campsite, but they won't actually approach. First, they observe from a distance, trying to calculate the social structure, right? Like who's the dominant one, who's vulnerable. But a sleeping human is sending absolutely zero physical body language. There's no submission, there's no dominance display. It's just this calm, completely unresponsive creature that doesn't even seem to care that a literal wolf is circling it. That complete lack of response acts like an invisible shield. The sheer confusion literally protects you, and it almost always leads the wolf to just give up and retreat.
Let's look at Section 3, our lethal evolutionary legacy. Because guys, there is a deeper, much darker truth hiding underneath all this caution, and it requires a major perspective flip. We always tend to think of ourselves as so vulnerable out there in the dark, right? But the reality is that humans are the true, undisputed apex predators of history. Just look at this timeline. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, way before we even had written language, we were hunting wolves and lions and bears. We drove massive, terrifying predators completely to extinction. The dire wolf, the cave lion, the American cheetah, they are gone, and it's largely because of us. The predators that are still alive today learned generation by bloody generation that humans equal death. In areas where animals have had generations of consistent human contact, they give us a massive, genetically hardwired wide berth.
There is this fantastic quote from the source material that just perfectly captures this predator's dilemma. It says, "A sleeping deer is still a deer. A sleeping human could have a spear in its hand." We are just so unpredictably dangerous. An animal that learns to fear humans, it survives. An animal that doesn't, it gets hunted out. And that fear is now quite literally baked into the DNA of the survivors.
Which brings us to Section 4, the rare exceptions.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking. If they are so terrified of us, why do attacks still happen? Hikers get mauled, tourists get a little too close to the wildlife. But here's the thing. Almost none of those attacks happen while the person is peacefully sleeping. When they do, it almost always stems from a complete breakdown of normal conditions. So the crucial point is, it comes down to 3 specific exceptions. First is food. A bear that gets conditioned to associate campsites with easy meals stops seeing humans as a threat and just starts seeing them as a food source. Second is desperation. This is a sick or starving predator completely overriding its natural instincts out of pure, raw necessity. And third is surprise. Accidentally cornering a mother with cubs forces the animal to defend itself. It's not hunting you, it's reacting. Notice what is noticeably absent from this list: a healthy predator calmly deciding to hunt a sleeping human. It just doesn't happen.
To really highlight that desperation exception, let's take a look at the famous man-eating lions of Tsavo. Back in 1898, these 2 lions killed dozens of railway workers in Kenya. They were behaving completely outside the norm of wild lions. Well, why? Researchers later discovered that both of these lions had severe dental damage. That made it nearly impossible for them to hunt their normal, faster, thicker-skinned prey. So they were injured, they were starving, and they were acting out of sheer absolute desperation.
All right, Section 5, the reality in the woods.
So what does all of this actually mean for you the very next time you decide to pitch a tent? Let's ground this in some hard data. The National Park Service meticulously records every single significant wildlife encounter across all U.S. parks. We are talking millions of people camping in bear and mountain lion territory every single year. According to the National Park Service, the number of fatal predator attacks on sleeping campers in all recorded national park history is effectively 0. Literally 0.
When we compare these risks side by side, it's actually staggering how disconnected our fear is from reality. Statistically speaking, you are far, far more likely to be struck by lightning inside the national park than to be attacked by a wild animal while you're asleep. You are vastly more likely to get injured just driving your car to the trailhead. The fear of a midnight mauling is essentially just a ghost story we tell ourselves. It's completely divorced from the actual statistical reality of the woods.
And that brings us right to the core takeaway of this explainer. As the source material so powerfully points out, humans are not prey. Humans are something else entirely. We spent so much of our collective history being afraid of the dark, building walls, keeping the fires burning bright, because sure, we used to be smaller and slower. But that balance, it shifted thousands of years ago. The animals that are out there in the dark right now, they aren't looking at you as a midnight snack. They are making a highly calculated, biologically hardwired choice to stay as far away from you as possible.
The wilderness that feels so huge and threatening to us is actually deeply, fundamentally intimidated by your presence. You are the apex of the apex. So, the next time you're lying awake in a tent, listening to a twig snap in the dark woods outside, trying to decide if you should be afraid, will you remember who the real monster in those woods actually is? Sleep well.